Asha's sharing this beautiful slide. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning for part 2 of our webinar, launching our new report, Pesticides and Climate Change, A Vicious Cycle. The report is live now on PAN's website. There will be more instructions at the end of the webinar for how to access it. Today, we are focusing on solutions to climate change in agriculture, and we are so excited to have Naimeen and Jeanette and Rob here to share with us. My name is Emily Summerlin. I am PAN's Acting Communications Director, and before we get started, I am once again going to cover a few housekeeping items before I hand it over to Margaret. We have 2 talented interpreters here, Tanya and Deborah, who will be translating the webinar into both Spanish and French. So after I turn on interpretation in just a moment, you will see a globe icon in your Zoom bar that will say interpretation is on/available. And if you click on it, you'll have the option to switch over to listen in Spanish or French. There's also the option to switch over to the English channel, which you would need to do to hear our interpreters translate any questions that are asked in Spanish or French. Otherwise, you can stay in the main room and you'll be able to hear the presentation in English. So I will let Tanya and Deborah give these instructions as well in Spanish and French, and then we'll turn on interpretation.
Thank you, Emily. And just to add a little bit of what you were saying, if somebody's joining with a phone, it's a little bit different. They need to tap your screen and look for 3 dots, select where it says more, and look for language interpretation and select the channel. And then after that, they need to click done. That way they will be able to hear the interpretation from French or Spanish into English. Buenos días a todos, bienvenidos. Nada más les estamos informando de que tenemos interpretación disponible en español y en francés. Si usted desea escuchar esta reunión en español, una vez que la interpretación sea encendida, si usted se unió con una computadora, en la parte de abajo de su pantalla va a ver el icono de un mundo. Por favor, seleccione el canal de español. Si usted ingresó con un teléfono móvil o con una tableta, va a tocar su pantalla, va a buscar 3 puntitos donde diga más o more. Va a seleccionar donde dice interpretación de idioma o language interpretation. Después va a seleccionar el canal de español. Y por último, es muy importante que seleccione el canal que diga, el botón que diga done, listo o finalizado para que nos pueda escuchar en español. Thank you very much. We can continue with French.
Bonjour à tous, merci d'être avec nous. On va expliquer un peu le fonctionnement de interprétation, traduction. On va avoir interprétation en français et en espagnol. Et avec pour choisir le canal que vous voulez pour espagnol ou français, ça dépend de quoi vous parlez. Si vous êtes sur un téléphone, vous allez chercher 3 points et ça va vous sélectionner français ou espagnol. Et quand ça s'est connecté, si vous êtes sur un ordinateur, vous allez chercher un monde et la même chose, ça va vous offrir espagnol ou français. Merci à tous et on va commencer.
Great. Thank you, Tanya and Deborah. I'm going to turn interpretation on right now. You should see an icon at the bottom. It's like a globe. It says interpretation. It should say that it's available. So if you click there, you can choose the channel you want to listen to. And Tanya is sharing directions in the chat as well, written for joining, which I can paste again. So interpretation's on. Please choose your channel. And the second thing is that we will have time for questions after we hear from our speakers. So please use the Q&A feature also in your toolbar at the bottom to submit your questions. I'll be scanning the chat. If there are questions there, I'll pull them over, but primarily please put them in the Q&A box. And you can enter your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll get to them at the end. And with that, I will hand it over to Margaret.
Thank you very much, Emily. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I am Margaret Reeves, Senior Scientist at Pesticide Action Network. I've been here for 26 years with a focus on farm worker health and safety and agroecology. Let me say a word about Pesticide Action Network for those who were not with us last week for part one of this two-part series. PAN is an international network of more than 600 groups and organizations in over 90 countries, working at the local, state, federal, and international level to focus on public policy that better protects those most at risk of exposure to pesticides, and public policy to promote those alternatives to the use of synthetic pesticides. And our focus internationally, and what we talked about last week, was agroecology, agroecological practices that help farmers transition away from use of synthetic pesticides. Today, we have three wonderful speakers. I will read their bios off first, and then we will just go from Rob Fox to Nayamin Martinez to Jeanette Acosta, about 10 minutes each, and then we'll have some questions. So let me start with Rob. Rob Fox owns and operates the Genuine Fox Farm, a diversified produce and poultry operation near Tripoli, Iowa. Rob and his partner, Tammy, have been committed to organic and sustainable practices while producing food for local consumption since 2004. An improperly targeted aerial pesticide application in 2012 placed Rob in a position where he could effectively use his farm story to advocate for positive changes in policy and practice with respect to pesticides in Iowa. Bringing several years of informal volunteer and advocacy experience through organizations such as Practical Farmers of Iowa, Iowa Farmers Union, and the Iowa Organic Association, Rob joined the PAN team in 2020, for which we're very happy. Rob was born and raised in Iowa, returning after working and pursuing further education elsewhere. In a former life, Rob earned doctoral degrees in computer science and adult education and has worked as a post-secondary educator in the field of computer science. We'll hear from Rob, and after Rob, we will hear from Nayamin Martinez. Nayamin is the director of the Central California Environmental Justice Network, CCEJN. Prior to joining CCEJN, Nayamin worked for the Madera County Public Health Department as a health education coordinator, and for 10 years was the health projects coordinator for the Binational Center for the Development of the Oaxacan Indigenous Communities. Nayamin has vast experience working with immigrants and residents of disadvantaged communities across the San Joaquin Valley, that's in California, managing public health programs, conducting participatory research, and launching leadership and civic engagement programs. Nayamin serves in various advisory groups, including the Environmental Justice Advisory Group of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, the Community Stakeholders Advisory Committee of the University of California at Davis Environmental Health Services, Health Sciences Core Center. Recently, she was invited to join the working group for the cancellation of chlorpyrifos. Nayamin holds a master's degree in both public health and sociology. And I personally have had the pleasure of working with Nayamin over many, many years, for which I am very grateful. Our third speaker, Jeanette Acosta, is an Indigenous permaculture specialist with Weaving Earth and a certified permaculture teacher and designer who specializes in maritime culture, herbalism, ethnobotany, and biodynamics. Her experience dealing with Indigenous peoples, international business people, world diplomats, heads of states, renowned artists and celebrities, and politicians gives her a very unique perspective on various cultures and customs. And I too was very honored to be able to work with Jeanette over the last couple years in a big California project to wean our state off of the dependence on highly hazardous pesticides. We have a big task ahead of us. So with that, I will pass the baton to Rob and take it away, Rob. Thank you again.
Okay, we should see a slideshow now. Is that correct? Okay, good. All right, it's a pleasure to be here. This is hopefully going to be a talk where I can focus on my perspective, and to give you a little bit of an idea as to my perspective. I think it needs to be clear that I live in the state of Iowa in the middle of the United States. And most of the land around me is currently row cropped. So it is very much immersed in the pesticide-based industrial agricultural system. And just to make things a little bit more clear, I'm kind of in a complete opposite to that with our farm. Our farm has produced vegetables. We raise poultry, we have raised fruit, and we have done seed production for vegetables since 2004. And it's a very diverse, small-scale operation. And what I would like to do is I'd like to give you a little bit of quick visual history. This is the area around our farm from the air in 1960. You can find our farm in the middle of this picture. Around us, you will see a little bit of a quilt work of different kinds of fields. You'll notice there are a couple of other farmsteads in the picture. So this is 1960. Clearly, there is still a fair amount of row cropping going on at this time. There was obviously chemicals being used, but if you would look closely, you might find that there are some hay fields, fields that are perennial crops. There is more diversity in the land. The fields are relatively small, and there's multiple farms in this small picture. But if we go to
Did Rob freeze for anyone? Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Okay. Rob, I don't know if you can hear us, but you are frozen.
Illustrates what's happening all over the world right now, where small farms are changing and going away, and farms are getting bigger, fields are getting bigger, and fields are growing more of just one thing. So that's what we're living in this world right now in the area where I live. But this is what my farm looks like from the air. So we just zoom in a little.
Oh, dear.
Wonder if we should have Rob turn his video off to see if that helps.
Yeah.
I'm gonna Slack him and just let him know to turn his video off. I'm sure he'll be back in a second. Thanks for holding tight with us, folks.
We always have a little bit of technical difficulties. Let's see.
Oh, dear. It seems perhaps he was kicked off. Oh, there you are, Rob. Okay, we have you, but we lost your slide.
Lost the screen. Yes. I love it when that happens. There, we should have the screen back now.
Rob,
Yeah.
do you want to try with your video off so we don't lose you again? See if that helps.
Yep, I will try and do that here.
Okay.
This is another thing. I do live in the country, and the internet in the country does not always work as well as it does other places. So apologies for that. So here's a picture of our farm. I think we maybe stopped where I was talking about some of the fields, but let's just go to something different. This farm is 15 acres in size. I am not sure how that converts to other units of measure, but it's 15 acres in size. And during our best production season, this farm produced 15 tons of food. 15 acres, 15 tons of diverse food. That includes vegetables, poultry products, fruit, the whole thing. It's just an indication that you do not have to have a large scale farm to produce a lot of food for people to eat. And this is not with us using every square inch of the farm. You can see that we have areas that are wild. We have areas that are pasture. And in fact, over time, there have been more trees and bushes on the edges put in. So we try to have a diverse operation. So now the question is can one small farm make a difference? And I want you to look at this picture carefully. If you see all those little smudgy dots in the sky, those are all dragonflies. Dragonflies are predators of the first degree. They'll eat almost anything. And when we first moved to the farm in 2004, we had no dragonflies on this farm. We have worked to try and increase the diversity on the farm. And this is what we see now for each of the last 5 years on our farm. We get hatchings of dragonflies that pretty much cover the sky at times. It's a good way to keep track of certain pests. We have mosquitoes on the farm, and dragonflies like to eat them. So we're using some of our nature's balances on our farm by providing them space to work. So one of the things I wanted to point out is we need more stewards of the land. And when I think of a steward, I think of somebody that is caring for the land, somebody that listens to the land. That is our primary purpose. The purpose is not to make money. The purpose is to watch and care for the land and the area around us. And if we have more stewards on the land, I tend to believe that we will have more people exposed to what the land is and what the land can do and to where our food comes from. And if we have that, more people will make a personal investment in doing these things that promote the health of our environment and of the people. And simply put, the more people who are involved and the more connected they are, the healthier they will be, and the healthier the whole community will be. That is my opinion, at least. So I'd like to see more diversity in our growing systems. So here's another picture from our farm. And you'll notice that the sprawling crop is cucumbers, and the crop that has fencing to the right are peas, and beyond that are carrots, and then there's more peas and more cucumbers. So essentially, this is just one of those rectangular plots on our farm, and there's diversity within each plot. And you'll notice a little frog on the bottom right. We plant this way specifically for those frogs because they eat cucumber beetles. And it just so happens the peas get an early start. They provide a home for the frogs. So when the cucumbers start growing and the cucumber beetles move in, the frogs are already there and they already have dinner. It's something for them to eat. One of the things that I really would like to see on more farms is I'd like to see us all embrace complexity. This is one of the principles of agroecology, is embracing complexity. What you see in this picture is in the center is our crop for food. That's a squash crop. On the right, we have a flowering crop called borage. On the left, we have two flowering crops, sunflowers and zinnias. And what we have found is by putting flowering crops next to the crop that is our food crop, the food crop typically performs better. And here's another example. This is an example of buckwheat with zinnias and other flowers with our melons and watermelons. And this is what I would call a successful field. People, a successful field is one you want to go stand in. It's one you want to look at and be happy in. And this is a field I really enjoyed very much. This particular year, this was our first experiment. We took 30% of our melon plants from the prior year and did not plant them. Instead, we put flowers in the field in that 30%, expecting maybe we would get less of a crop. But the opposite occurred. We had 1/3 more production this season. And every year following that, we continue to have the same trend. It's just an indicator that if we have a field we want to be in, a field that's diverse and complex, we can get success. So here are some options for introducing diversity into our farming systems. Crop rotations can be longer. In Iowa, it's typically just corn and soybeans, and that's not sufficient. We need much longer, more complex rotations. I illustrated a couple of intercropping techniques in the prior slides. There are ways to integrate perennial plants into our crops. Even some of the corn systems could integrate perennial plants. We need to maintain wild areas so that nature can provide its services for us. We need to include animals into the system, and you'll notice on the right a picture of buckwheat, which is a cover crop we very much appreciate on the farm, and the pollinators love it when it starts to flower. Another principle of agroecology is taking inherited or indigenous knowledge and combining that with science. And here's an example. This is called a high tunnel. It's a plastic covered building. I will admit to not being thrilled that it is plastic. However, the building is something that was necessary on our farm with climate change. We have been getting more and more excessive rains, and some of our crops and some of the things we grew struggled with that. And some people who use a high tunnel would plant it entirely in one crop that has the highest value. Let's say tomatoes or spinach. But we don't believe that that's what we should be doing. We know with our knowledge about the land and about plants and about pollinators that it needs to be diverse. And so we include diversity within our growing system inside of the building as well as outside of the building. So you'll see in that picture melons, onions, carrots, beets, beans, peppers, tomatoes, and there was some lettuce in there as well, all in one small building. But we're also aware that this building does not take care of using natural services, so we actually made it so that this building can move. So each year we move this to a different plot so the land can be exposed to the natural elements, the natural frost cycles, the rains. We can allow the land to rest. And so every other year we grow in a spot and we don't grow in the other one. So what I'd like to see more on farms is more recognition of the services that nature provides. We have noticed over time that the inclusion of clover and allowing the asters to grow, one of the wildflowers that are very common if you allow some place to go wild, provides places for our pollinators and for our beneficial critters, and even, yes, some of the pests who happen to be food for these beneficial insects and critters. We need to provide those wild spaces. You'll see clover on the top right, for example. Some people on farms in Iowa will mow an area as a lawn space, just so it looks green and is grass. Instead, we allowed a lot of that area to become clover, and we don't mow it frequently. We mow it often enough to encourage the clover to keep blooming, but we do not treat it like it's another piece of land that has to be worked. And this is the closing thought I would like to leave everybody with right here. What we've been doing in the United States in particular, since the Europeans moved to this country, is we've been adapting agriculture, adapting the land to our agriculture. Whatever we wanted to do, we said we don't care what the land is, we're going to make it fit. We'll knock hills down, we'll take down trees, we'll divert water, we'll drain water, we'll do all these things to make it fit the agriculture that we know. What we need to be doing is adapting our agriculture to the land. This is what has been known by the indigenous peoples for generations. And this is what we need to go back to. And if we put more people on the land, more stewards on the land, on more small diversified farms, then you'll have the ability for each person or persons to actually listen carefully and make those adaptations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. That was beautiful, wonderful. important stories to tell. So everybody think about your questions, type them up in the Q&A, and Emily will be ready with that. After Jeanette speaks, Ben, first we will hear from Nayamin. Take it away, Nayamin.
Gracias. Thank you. Buenos días, buenas tardes. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I am Nayamin. And before I start talking about the work that I do with CCJN, I know we have colleagues from all over the world. So I just want to start by saying where I am, work and live. So I was born in Mexico, but I moved to California 23 years ago. And I live in the heart of California, Fresno. Our region, normally also called as Central Valley or San Joaquin Valley, is known as the basket of the world. We are the main agricultural producer of our state, and I would say in some crops of the entire United States. That comes along with unexpected situations, like as you would imagine, heavily use of pesticides. So in California, there are over 200 million pounds of pesticides applied every single year, and more than 60% of those are applied in the region where I live, the Central Valley. Especially the county where I live, Fresno, is the #1 user of pesticides. That would give you the context of why this topic is of extreme importance to me personally, but most importantly for the organization that I represent, that for 22 years has been fighting for environmental justice. Why? Because I was appalled when I moved here 23 years ago to hear in the news often that crews of farm workers have been sprayed with these chemicals, that they
Is Naomi frozen?
Yes, I was going to ask. Oh,
We might
dear.
need to have her turn off her video too.
Yeah. If you're hearing us, Nayamin.
See if she comes back.
Oh, goodness. The beauty of technology doesn't always work for us.
Let me see if I can chat her.
Okay. Oh, there you are again, Nayamin. Okay.
I am sorry, guys. Also, like Rob, my internet could be sometimes spotty. So I'll turn my camera off to see if that helps. As I was saying, there's thousands of people who live in rural areas of California who are just 50, 100 feet away from where these pesticides are applied. So that is the concern that we have. We're not only talking about the farm workers who are definitely the backbone of this ag industry, but also about the people who have their homes and are breathing the drift of these pesticides every single day of their lives. As it was said in my introduction, I have the pleasure to participate in multiple studies that have documented how much these pesticides are inside these houses and in the bodies of these people. And we have used this data to move out and advocate for our government to do something about it. We have been able to get rid of some pesticides, obviously not only alone, but in partnership with PAN and many other advocates. Chlorpyrifos is one example. California, before it was banned in the United States, California set the precedent of banning this pesticide. But we cannot go pesticide by pesticide because there are so many of them used here in our state. So definitely pesticide, as I said, has been in the radar of my work and my personal attention since I moved to California. But more so because I have noticed since we have been discussing how we can tackle climate change here in the state, that pesticides have always been the missing piece in all state discussions. We have so many plans, and we are supposedly known as a very progressive state that is always setting standards for others to follow. And yes, we have very ambitious targets to battle or to combat climate change, but missing in those plans have always been the pesticides. And it was like mind-blowing for me that why do we have plans that did not include this important factor? We were never been able to really combat climate change when we are not including pesticides. So when I read the report that Pam put together, I was delighted. It was like really going into like a kid going into a toy store story, because for me, this is a calling card that I can turn around and go and take to legislators, to decision makers at the state level to tell them, you see, we were not crazy. You need to include pesticides because they're not only many of them directly greenhouse gases, but also they are contributing to the formation of other greenhouse gases and also exacerbating ozone levels. So the only thing I would wish is that we would have this report before, because the past 2 years, my organization and many others, including PAN, we have been pushing the California Air Resources Board, which is the agency that creates the rules for our state, to include in their scoping plan. This is a plan that they put together every 5 years to say what are strategies for our climate, to combat climate change. And sure enough, they were not even planning to include pesticides, but we mobilized, we took farm workers, we took advocates to give public comments, to submit written comments. And I'm happy to say that they included one target, so it's not a lot, but they are going to be targeting a reduction in one pesticide, 1,3-D. So definitely much more work to come. But this, as I said, this is a report that is going to be life-changing, if I may say that, for all of us as an instrument to go and advocate. It is also important to say that it would also allow us to tackle other problems that we have here in the valley where I live. Not only we have this pesticide issue, we have the worst air quality in the entire United States. And again, these pesticides have never been considered as a contributor to our ozone problems. So we are in the process of revisiting our state implementation plan for this particular contaminant, ozone. So once again, this plan or this report will be very handy to come and advocate, because that's a lot of the work that CCJN does. We educate farm workers, we bring them to the table to decision makers what changes they need to do, but at the same time we are advocating ourselves, because oftentimes we see that farm workers' voices are not as heard, because especially at the local level. And I know I'm running out of time, but I just want to say that for me, this is an important opportunity to promote agroecology. This is something that CCJN has started to look into in the past 5 years, and we're partnering with Janet and others to promote agroecology in the Central Valley as an alternative to this pesticide use and main agriculture. I also want to flag that in a few weeks, the Department of Pesticide Regulation and the California Department of Food and Agriculture are releasing the Sustainable Pest Management Roadmap. It includes concrete goals of how California can move away of using pesticides a lot. So stay tuned, because again, that report or that roadmap with this report that Pam produced will be important tools for all of us living in California to move forward our state from depending on these chemicals and making our communities and our lives healthier and more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nayamin. That was great. And of course, music to our ears that our report will be helpful and productive. So next we have Jeanette Acosta, and I've already introduced Jeanette, so take it away and thank you very much. You are muted. There you go.
Greetings, everyone. Just to be on the safe side, because I live in the mountains, I'm going to turn off my video as well so we can alleviate any potential technology situations. But before I turn off my camera, I just want to say that I recognize I'm a guest in the homelands of the unceded territory of the Southern Sierra Miwok Indian Nation. And I'm zooming in from the small town commonly known as Mariposa, California, near Yosemite National Park. And I just wish to extend my respect and gratitude to the many indigenous peoples who call this area where I am their home and their homeland. And I thank you, Marge, and your staff for inviting me to be a part of today's panel, to be a part of everyone's lives here today. And may we all grow together well in this very holy place that we call Earth. Okay, so I'm going to turn off my camera and get on with my talk with you today. Climate change and agriculture are closely interconnected. Agriculture is not the sole anthropogenic factor to induce it. Nonetheless, the effect of agriculture on climate change is tremendous. Indigenous knowledge, native science, traditional ecological knowledge, these terms are used interchangeably to refer to holistic, evolving practices and beliefs passed down through generations about the relationships of living beings to their environment. Indigenous knowledge systems provide detailed information about ecosystems and spiritual and cultural identity. Native peoples use this knowledge to maintain and cultivate biodiversity, valued resources, and ecological health in their homelands. Indigenous people throughout the world, and I'm grateful they're on this call today, have been meeting for decades to share their experiences of climate change and to press forward an action plan to address the impacts. Impacts to small island nations and to Arctic areas were among the first to be observed. One of the first international sessions to focus on climate change was the 2008 United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. The Inuit Circumpolar Council, observing the rapid changes at high latitudes, hosted the Indigenous Peoples Global Summit on Climate Change in 2009, which prepared recommendations to take to the 2009 Conference of Parties known as COP15, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change at Copenhagen, Denmark. Unfortunately, COP15 did not achieve a binding agreement on long-term action, so the effort continues at the international level to address impacts to Indigenous peoples through forums such as the annual COP meetings. As expressed at the Indigenous Peoples Global Summit, climate change themes of Indigenous people are: Indigenous peoples are disproportionately impacted by climate change, layering new challenges on top of existing problems. Conversely, resources available to many Native communities to address climate change impacts are disproportionately scarce. They are also impacted by unintended consequences of some mitigation measures. There is a great need for free and prior informed consent for Indigenous peoples in adaptation or mitigation actions, and for formal participation in international bodies.
I'm sorry, I think the Spanish interpreters are asking you to slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Indigenous knowledge can help shape strategies to address climate change. Yet such knowledge must also be protected from misappropriation and misuse. Developed countries generally have contributed most to greenhouse gas emissions and should pay that ecological debt to share in the burden that falls disproportionately on Native communities in addressing climate change impacts. There are also efforts underway at the national, regional, and local levels to foster action on climate change. The National Congress of American Indians has developed a set of federal priorities focusing on energy, including tribal set-asides of no less than 5% of allowances that are provided to states to support programs in renewable energy, energy efficiency, domestic adaptation, and natural resources adaptation, among others. Flexible use of such funds for tribal capacity to develop plans, collaborate, and administer related programs. Some substantive inclusion of tribes and Alaska Native villages and programs for energy efficiency, green jobs, tribal traditional practices, and other international programs, and overcoming the underlying obstacles to renewable energy deployment on tribal lands. Climate change is and will affect the quantity and quality of resources tribes depend upon to perpetuate their cultures and livelihoods. Climate impacts on coasts, valleys, and forests are expected to directly affect culturally important fungi, plant, and animal species, species losses, and shifts in species ranges, in turn affecting tribal sovereignty, culture, livelihoods, and economy. In addition to providing sustenance, these resources and habitats have proven invaluable to cultural, economic, medicinal, and community health for countless generations. Traditional ecological knowledge and historical tribal adaptive approaches in resource management and contemporary examples of research and tribal practices related to forestry, invasive species, traditional use of fire, and tribal to federal and unrecognized tribal to federal coordination on resource management projects have been active for a number of years now. Increasing wildfires are projected to affect culturally valued resources. Rising temperatures, hotter and drier summers, and wildfires are projected to increase in frequency, intensity, and severity. Droughts, as well as tree mortality and vegetation stress, will result in longer fire seasons by increasing fuel loading, insect outbreaks, and the spread of invasive species. Rising temperatures are projected to affect tree ring growth and vegetation productivity in the Arctic. And just as climate change stands to affect forests and tribally valued forest resources, forests will play a role in affecting local climate. Traditional ecological knowledge, this indigenous way of understanding relationships among species, ecosystems, and ecological processes can play a vital role in climate change assessment and adaptation efforts that bridge human and environmental systems. Simultaneously, peoples adapt to their knowledge base to changes in the environment. So the last couple of years have been a period of increased food prices, increasing the number of people going to bed hungry at night to over 1 billion. The underlying causes of the increases in conventional agriculture food prices are complex and include two factors related to climate change: poor harvest due to an increasingly variable climate, the use of food crops for biofuels, as well as increased demand from rapidly growing economies, higher energy, fertilizer prices, and low food stocks per capita, export restrictions on agricultural food products from a number of significant exporters to protect domestic consumers, and speculation on the commodity futures market. In addition, many developed country agricultural and export subsidies distort global markets, depressing world prices in some cases.
Can you slow a little bit, please?
Sure, high prices stimulate increased production, but rebuilding depleted global stocks to levels that markets are comfortable with will take years. Therefore, a key question is, what do we need to know and what do we need to do if we are to provide sustainable, nutritious, and affordable food for the world in an environmentally and socially just, sustainable manner? The goal of affordable, nutritious food for all in an environmentally sustainable manner is achievable, but it cannot be achieved through current agricultural business as usual. Agriculture can no longer be thought of as a production alone, but the inescapable interconnectedness of agriculture's different economic, social, and environmental roles and functions must also be explicitly recognized. There's so much to discuss. I only have 1 minute left, and small-scale farmers need access to the best heirloom seeds financing and access to markets, and we need to create opportunities for innovation and entrepreneurship to meet their needs. We also need to recognize the important role of women, BIPOC folks, and empower them through education, access to financing, and property rights. We are in the situation of increasing anxiety, and there are historic impact when talking about water availability and groundwater management. I'm just going to close because there's so much. Well, if I can just have an extra minute, farmers I know are facing compensation costs, invasive pest issues, water quality, groundwater management legislations, labor costs. How do we view life with respect to collaboration over competition? These are human beings that work hard to make sure we are all receiving produce in the world, and they deserve a good wage. Agricultural Labor Relations Act is an issue. Healthcare mandates. The continuing need for immigration reform hasn't gone away. I don't know too much about this, but I do know it's an issue, and they're all human beings that require respect. Food safety and water is like the #1 issue. We have to respect our environment and respect the impact of healthy agriculture and clean water on our quality of life. Clean water is a basic human right. Water is life. We need to keep raising awareness about climate change and strengthen our connection with the local tribal communities to figure out what we are going to do to prepare. Together, we are stronger. The future is not preordained, but is in our collective hands. While we can build upon our successes, we must also recognize that an extrapolation of business as usual will not suffice. Instead, we need to be bold enough to rethink agriculture. Most importantly, if we are to help today's and tomorrow's poor and disadvantaged, we need to acknowledge that the time to act is now.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. And thank you, Nayamin, and thank you, Rob. So Emily, you must have some questions lined up.
We have lots of questions. We're not going to get to all of them. But after the webinar, if you send your questions to us, we can try and get them farmed out and answered for you, if possible. So going to try and balance these questions between Nayamin and Jeanette and Rob. The first one is for Nayamin. So California is spending unprecedented amounts of money to address climate change, and wondering if you have thoughts on if or how those funds are being directed to support farm workers, and if not, what could they do better?
Yeah, that's true. In my opinion, there has not been enough investments on specifically farm workers. It has gone to other strategies, including giving farmers, big ag, a lot of money to replace their tractors, to do other things that oftentimes small farmers do not have the same access, especially farmers of color. The process to apply for those, those funds, like from the Healthy Soils or other initiatives, are very difficult to get into. So we see definitely an imbalance on the access. One of the things that I have been doing with Margaret and others that are part of the Food and Farming Equity Coalition is highlighting what are the needs at the investments that are really focused on small farmers and farm workers. So, for example, it definitely not only protecting them where they're in the workplace, but also in their homes. Weatherization programs and other things that can really help them weather this climate change crisis better. So that's the short answer is no, it has not been enough. And that's why one of the things we're going to be working in the next couple of weeks is putting together language for a bond measure that will be including a lot of the things that we have seen.
Oh dear, looks like you froze, Nayamin. Well, that was mostly answered, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nayamin. Question for Rob. I know, Rob, there are some more technical questions you've been in here answering. let's see. I want to make sure you didn't answer it already. When you say you don't grow on a patch for a season, does that mean the land is fallow and bare or planted in cover crop?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things that is important to us is to cover the soil. We are concerned about soil health on our farm. And if you simply leave a patch, it will, of course, try to fill itself with plants that happen to have seeds in the soil. But we would rather get that covered as quickly as possible and have roots in the soil. So we almost always use cover crops.
Thanks, Rob. A question for Jeanette. Toward the end there, you mentioned strengthening our relationships with tribal communities. We know many solutions to climate change in agriculture and land management are Indigenous practices that have been around for millennia. How can we ensure that Indigenous folks are supported and included in informing climate change solutions being put forward by governments and in public policy?
Well, like I said, first and prior informed consent is so crucial. Often agencies and even private sectors will create a plan and then call us in at the very end instead of at the very beginning of planning. And I encourage that, that those folks ask us to partner in from the very beginning so that our voices are heard, because most often it ends up in costly mitigation processes because they did the wrong thing because they didn't consult with us in the very beginning. So I think that's an important factor. And also building relations is important. Personal relationships are truly one, we can't take care of the world alone. So we need to create good relations and fair practices.
On mute. Thank you, Jeanette. A question for Nyameen. Is there a list of pesticides somewhere that have been banned in California that participants can find?
That list that will probably point you back to the websites of the plan, but also the California pesticide reform is a statewide coalition that has been fighting for 30 years. So I'm sure they're in their archives, you could find something. And also just check the Department of Pesticide website, although they have been, taking down a lot of information. But so I will go to PAN and CPR first, and I can put it on the chat or directly answer.
Thanks, Nyameen. Rob, this question came up in the last webinar, and I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I know we're talking about agroecology. We hear terms like regenerative agriculture. What are, with all of these different terms, what are the differences there, and what sets agroecology apart as what we're highlighting?
One way to look at this is agroecology is an overall philosophy or an overarching ideal that we are attempting to reach. And so regenerative agriculture might be part of that, just as organic agriculture is part of that. So a way to think about it is you have several approaches that people take, and they all fall under the umbrella of agroecology. And again, let's just go back to the fact that we need to look at the land that we are working with and the weather that surrounds it and the things that are there. And that will help us determine in which of our approaches we want to use in a particular area. So just think of it as children underneath the parent. The parent is agroecology.
Thanks, Rob. And I think we have time for one more, which I think it might be great to hear from all of you. There were some questions around good books or resources on sustainable agriculture, agroecology. I'm wondering if each of you have recommendations around resources folks can look toward to read, learn more. And if you don't right now, that's okay. We can send out, we're going to be sending out the recording to both part 1 and part 2 of the webinar, and we can share some resources there as well.
Can
I
add,
have,
because-
I have several, go ahead, Naomi.
You go, Rob, because this is a different answer.
There are several books out there, especially from my perspective as a grower. The problem is that list could get very, very long, and a lot of them are specialized. So I really rather not list a
Okay.
whole bunch.
No worries.
I
Nice.
put something in the chat. FAO.org has a lot of wonderful global resources that you can read about agroecology.
Great. Thank you, Jeanette. Naomi, did you have something else to add?
There were several questions asking me about the roadmap that I mentioned. So the public release of this report will be this Friday. There's going to be like a media only event that both the Department of Food and Agriculture, the Cali PA secretary will be attending, but then there's a webinar planned for February. We don't have those details, but in the chat, or I'll put it in the chat, there's the information for the public officer of the Department of Pesticide Regulation, who is right now the lead for any questions. I'm sure they will be publishing it in their websites, but for now, that's the best way to get information about the report.
Great. Thank you, Naomi. Asha, do you want to throw up the slide again?
Yeah, let me do that real quick.
Great. Yeah, so I'm guessing most of you came to part 1 of this webinar too, where we talked about the report. Of course, here we covered solutions. The report is live on the PAN website. It's available in English, French, and Spanish. It's in the resource library section, and it'll be on the homepage of our website as well, so pana.org. We, as I said, recorded both part 1 and part 2 of this webinar, and we will be sending these out to the email that you registered with. So keep an eye out on your inbox, and please connect with us on social media. Our handles are below: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our website. And Asha and Margaret are report authors. Their contact information is here. As I said, if we didn't get to your questions, feel free to email us and we'll try and get those answered for you. Thank you so much to Naomi and Jeanette and Rob as our speakers. Marg, do you want to close anything else out?
Just thank you very, very much. Please feel free to contact Asha or myself with any questions. Heartfelt thank you to Jeanette, Nayamin, Rob, and look forward to continued work together. Hasta la victoria.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.